It's Dave and Evelyn from the camera store.
And today we're talking about the brand new Canon EOS R5 Mark II.
Today we're going to give you our first impressions of a pre-production Canon EOS R5 Mark II. We're going to be celebrating our Western culture because it has become kind of a tradition for Dave and I to hit the prairies close to home to shoot these new releases.
The original R5 is still a very good camera, but it's starting to show its age a little bit. So the R5 Mark II is a much anticipated update of that camera, featuring a bunch of new technology and some really good updates we're looking forward to. There's so much to talk about with this camera, so let's get into it.
Physically, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II is pretty similar to the original R5, and I like a lot of those design choices. So first of all, if you've never held a Canon camera before, you should know that their grips are really well designed. They have a nice hold to them, and so even if you have larger hands, it still feels really solid when you're gripping the camera. You see some different control features as well. So we have this fully articulating touchscreen, and Canon always has a really good user interface. It's great to work with. While you're shooting on a bright sunny day, we still have that 5.76 million dot EVF, but they've actually increased the brightness and also added an anti-fog feature. When you look at controlling this camera, we have the 3 dials that you can do all of your manual functions. We also have a joystick on the back of the camera that we really love. The position of it's really nice. It's easy to find with your thumb. And then we have the autofocus on button. On the left side of the camera, I really like how we have the photo and video settings easily defined. And so you can easily swap between the 2 features and it will maintain your individual settings. So when you're shooting video, you'll have all of your video settings dialed in, and then when you switch to photo, you can have separate settings completely, which is really nice. For media for this camera, we have the CF Express Type B card, as well as a fast UHS 2 SD memory card slot. And then on the bottom of the camera, we're looking at a brand new battery. We always love when there's new batteries because that means better optimization and better battery life for new performance features. Now this is the new LPE6P battery, not to be confused with the predecessors, because this battery actually gives you full functionality of a lot of cool new stuff that Dave's going to talk about when we get into performance. But don't worry, if you have some previous Canon cameras like the R5, the old batteries are backwards compatible. You just need this new battery if you want to have access to all of the new Canon features. When we look at the ports of this camera, you'll be happy to know that we have a USB-C port for charging the camera. We have a full-size HDMI port. Yes! We have a microphone jack, a headphone jack, a sync port, and then on the top of the camera, we actually have a great hot shoe. This is a multi-control hot shoe. It gives you some additional functionality for different accessories, and it also has this new hot shoe cover, which is pretty nice. I always lose those dinky little hot shoe covers, and so this one in the box comes with a more refined one to really protect it and maintain that weather sealing. The weather sealing is the same as the R5, and again, the durability and construction of this camera is what you expect from a Canon. It just feels really good. I have no worries. It's very durable and rugged, and if you want to increase the size of the camera, there are going to be some grip options. So we're going to have 3 different grip options, and one of them is actually has some additional cooling features. So you'll notice on the bottom of the camera there is an exchange here that'll help get some of the heat off of the camera, but if you're doing a lot of video work, especially in hot conditions, take a look at the new battery grip that contains a cooling fan.
We've been spoiled for quite some time when it comes to the autofocus of these cameras. The R5 was fantastic and it was able to capture some really good images. And then we got the R3 and the R6 Mark II, and if you compared those to the R5, they felt significantly faster in their operation, and that's partially because of their faster processors. Now the R5 Mark II differentiates even more because it has their Digic X processor in this camera, but they also added the Digic Accelerator, which is an addition to the Digic X processor, giving us even more functionality when it comes to autofocus. This is all captured on a brand new 45 megapixel stack sensor that improves rolling shutter by 40% over the original R5. Now I can tell you that the autofocus performance on this camera is fantastic. If you take a look at these sequences here, one I set it for animal detection, and as the horse and rider are riding straight towards me, the camera has locked on the horse's eyes, and I get a great sequence of shots at 30 frames per second. Every one of them looks fantastic. And on another pass, I switched to human detection, and you can see how the camera analyzed the scene and only focused on the rider itself, ignoring the horse's face. Now you can set it for auto subject detection, and the camera itself will decide if it's a human, an animal, or a bird in the frame that it's following and make a decision based on that. But if you know you're shooting an animal, set it for animal detection and it ignores all the other possibilities and just looks for animals and animals only within the frame. Now, the new feature they've added to this camera that I'm very excited about is the ability to put a face profile into the memory of this camera. That means if I'm following a certain subject on a sporting field, I can take a picture of that person's face, register it with the camera, and the camera's going to constantly keep looking for that profile. So this is amazing if I'm going to be tracking them through sport, all kinds of action, and this means that you're telling the camera to only look for this person's face in the frame. This is going to be fantastic when it comes to shooting sports and action. And even like wedding photographers, if you're working with a big wedding party, you can register the bride and groom's face and switch back and forth between those two, or up to 10 different profiles within the camera itself for the faces and the subject that you want to track within a crowd. Now, Canon has added an action priority mode, and this makes shooting soccer and volleyball and basketball easier than ever because it's analyzing the whole scene, not just the player's face, not just the player's body, but it's actually looking where the ball is in the frame as well and analyzing that scene to give you a best chance of getting great action shots. And the last thing I forgot to mention is we now have a pre-capture mode built into the Canon R5 Mark II. This allows you to watch for those very fleeting moments, somebody hitting a ball with a bat, for instance. You can push the shutter button up to 15 frames after the actual shot and scrub back to those 15 frames and capture that perfect image. Overall, my time with the Canon R5 Mark II has really shown that Canon has stepped up their game across the board when it comes to autofocus. It's incredibly tenacious as it tracks a subject, and it's so confident-inducing that I can choose, do I want the horse face in focus, do I want the rider's face in focus, and I can confidently frame the shot, and the camera's going to do the rest when it comes to tracking that action.
As Dave mentioned, at the heart of this camera is a 45 megapixel stacked full frame sensor. Now, I've been shooting with the Canon EOS R5 for quite a few years now, and I use it for most of my portrait work. And that's because I always grab that camera because I love the skin tones. Now, this is pre-production, and one of the things that we wanted to look at is dynamic range. Is there a penalty for having this stacked sensor like we're seeing in a lot of other cameras these days? Now, when we are able to take a look at that, we'll obviously let you guys know our findings. But to be honest with you, my point of view is that with these cameras, getting the enhanced performance, the better autofocus, you can get great exposures in camera. And for most people, you're not really going to notice the detriment in having maybe a little bit less dynamic range. So we'll be able to get into that when we have a production unit. Another thing that can improve your output is you can up-res your images. So if you're doing something where you need a larger scale file, you can actually do this up-res that takes into account some deep learning. So you're getting a file that's 179 megapixels. So it's not to be confused with like a pixel shift mode where it's taking images using the sensor shift. In this particular case, it's actually taking into account deep learning, which is kind of cool, and being able to give you that super high resolution file. When the R5 came out many moons ago, there was some pretty exciting specs on that camera. Now, the only limitation is that it had some issues right out of the gate with overheating, and Canon has found ways to mitigate this. So in this new model, you'll notice that there is like a cooling exchange vent on the bottom of the camera, and there's going to be an additional grip available that will give you some more cooling features. And so this will allow you to have some enhanced video features. So I'd say one of the most exciting is being able to shoot 4K 120 full sensor readout in camera. That's pretty cool. I mean, when you're shooting different functions and you want to be able to capture the emotion and motion, you can do that at 4K 120. It looks pretty amazing. You're able to shoot 8K RAW in camera. It also has this small RAW option that gives you a more compressed format. And who doesn't like that for their computer, being able to work with it when it's a bit more compressed? It's going to be a little bit easier on your editing process. It also has C-Log 2, which they haven't put in the R5 series before. So again, we really like being able to work with that. And lastly, it does give you the option to record 2K proxy files. So if you do have a remote editor and you want to be able to send them some proxy files to start working on a timeline for you, we've been pretty happy with that. The user interface is quite good. Autofocus is working well for video as well. And so I think it ticks a lot of boxes. There might be some tools, you know, that people are missing depending on what system that they're coming from. It doesn't have the timecode sync or anamorphic D-squeeze, but I think that this is a very solid full frame option with a lot of flexibility.
All right, so we've had some quality time with the R5 Mark II, maybe not enough quality time, but what do you think of it so far?
I think that this is a solid upgrade, a good Mark II to the R5. I mean, we liked it. It was getting a little bit dated. You know, the R6 Mark II had some really cool features, but this takes it up a whole nother notch. And it's great to see that they put in some flagship technology that we'd see in the R1 into the R5 too. I think this is actually the more exciting of the two announcements for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited that they actually went ahead and put the eye control autofocus from the R3 into this camera. I mean, I thought that'd be reserved for the R1 and the R3 level of camera, but to put it in here is brilliant.
And this is something that Canon has had in their wheelhouse since like 1997, I think, with the EOS 3 film camera. And this is now refined. It works really well. It's the best implementation that I've seen of it from Canon so far.
Yeah, I mean, Canon's basically stepped up their game across the board with this camera, and especially on the autofocus side of things. Yeah. The advanced autofocus systems they put in here allows me to track a subject much more accurately, but being able to register a person's face, if that's all I care about in a frame, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and for both photo and video, I think this makes a solid hybrid option. Definitely for it being a Mark II camera, they've added so much functionality to it. It's great to see that they've implemented a new battery that gives you the best optimization for this performance. They've mitigated things like overheating problems. I mean, we're shooting on a pretty hot day for Canada anyways. It's like 33 degrees Celsius. We haven't seen any overheat warnings, and that's without adding that additional cooling grip. We're excited to test it out when it comes available.
I mean, the R5 series has been like the working pros photographer's camera.
Such a workhorse,
right?
yeah.
It is a workhorse for so many different genres of photography, but you know, the R5 might not have been fast enough. It might not have, the rolling shutter might have been an issue for sports photographers, but a lot of that has been alleviated with this new generation sensor, and we have even faster frames per second.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about this, and of course we want to know, what are your thoughts on it? Does it check any boxes? Is it missing anything for photo or video? Please let us know in the comments below.
And you think adding a person's face profile is super cool? I think it is. Make sure you follow us both on Instagram.
And if you're new to our channel, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll catch you again very soon.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to check out more of our recent content, click up here. And if you're Canadian and you want to support local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.